The evenly divided U.S. Senate has joined forces against the common enemy. Lawmakers have passed a bill that would ramp up America's technology sector to compete with China.
This bill could be the turning point for American leadership in the 21st century. And for that reason, this legislation will go down as one of the most significant bipartisan achievements of the U.S. Senate in recent history.
This is an opportunity for the United States to strike a blow on behalf of answering the unfair competition that we are seeing from Communist China.
The U.S. Innovation and Competition Act passed the chamber in a 68-32 vote and still needs the approval of the House of Representatives. It allocates around $250 billion for emerging technologies where China has invested heavily. The bulk of the money will go to research and development for artificial intelligence and quantum computing. And more than $50 billion will be spent on increasing the production of semiconductors and telecommunications hardware. The legislation also includes mandatory sanctions on Chinese entities that engage in cyber attacks and steal U.S. intellectual property. Beijing has condemned the bill as slanderous, saying it runs counter to the two countries' plans to strengthen cooperation.
We are firmly opposed to the U.S. treating China as an imaginary enemy. The biggest threat to the U.S. is itself. It's more important for the U.S. to do its own business well than anything else.
China isn't the only country in the firing line. The White House has formed what it calls a strike force that would penalize nations that steal intellectual property or give their companies excessive subsidies.
We know that as we strengthen cooperation with our allies and partners, we also have to push back against unfair trade practices by competitor nations that have hollowed out the U.S. industrial base and undermine our supply chain security.
Officials say the Biden administration's goal is to increase U.S. trade with like-minded allies. That will mean a gradual but significant reduction of imports from China and other would-be competitors. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
For more, let's go to Daniel Ives. He's the managing director of Wedbush Securities in New York. Welcome to the show. Now, first of all, are U.S. industries losing competitiveness, and why is that?
Look, I think the reality is, especially when it comes to the chip sector or more and more technology, 5G, electric vehicles, I mean, China has clearly been the winner there and more relying on that. And I think the chip shortage has just further highlighted that. Now, I think what the U.S. is doing, it's an arms race right now. 5G, AI, electric vehicles, that's what this is about. But I think it's a balancing act because ultimately a decoupling is not something that the industry or investors want to see. So I do think it's a very tight wire-wrap balancing act that the Biden administration needs to walk here.
Talking about balances, one balance that's been getting worse as far as the U.S. is concerned is its trade balance with China. Do you think these measures will move the needle back in Washington's favor?
Look, I think the bar's a little worse than the bite on this. I think we have to see how it plays out, really over the coming 12 to 18 months. But look at Apple and Tesla, just as two examples. I mean, Apple, they've really bet the farm on production as well as demand coming out of China. And Tesla's done the same when it comes to the Gigafactory as well as electric vehicles. And that's why right now, this is something where I think it was long overdue in terms of some of the R&D initiatives, especially on semiconductors and others. But it comes back to price parity. In other words, the average consumer, if an iPhone was made in the U.S., wouldn't want to pay $2,000, $2,500 for it. So I think that's going to be the slippery slope here.
So effectively, these are subsidies, and as following WTO rules, blanket subsidies are not good. Does this move fall afoul of those principles?
I think this all needs to come out. That's why I think the G7 meeting is going to be important, as well as ultimately what the bill, once it actually goes through the Beltway in the House and the president, what it actually looks like. I think you take a step back right here. I think there's some balance between collaboration, not shutting off the chip sector in terms of Asia, because the reality is for the next 5-6 years, nothing can really massively change coming out of the chip sector and reliance on China and Asia. I do think these are smart measures in terms of ramping up production in the US. But at least for now, this continues to be a game of high stakes poker. And I think that's what's really being played here.
All right, Daniel Ives, thank you so much for your input on the show.
Thank you.